Hi, welcome back to Lily Jiang Williams' weekly show, Immigrants Speak. I am her co-host, Amani. Today, I'm very happy to introduce you my friend, Iya. She's our second guest on the show, who is from Europe. And she has a fascinating story to tell. And we met a couple years ago at an immigrants panel here in Colorado. We shared a lot of concerns about today's America. Welcome, Iya.
Thank you so much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to share my experience.
Thank you for being here. Can you please introduce to our audience a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Iya, I'm from Spain. I have a PhD in astronomy. I have 3 masters. So I have a lot of education. I have a lot of experience in my field. But in Spain, if I can say so, it's not enough. That's not what is important because the merits don't matter there. It's who you know and what political affiliation do you have, which is what is important.
So tell us a little bit about like how you grew up and what your life was like in Spain.
So in Spain, we had the civil war in 36. My grandparent, for instance, his parents were killed in the war, so he grew up in an orphanage. So my grandparents' generation didn't have much. They grew up in a post-war time with little food, with little access to anything, plus having a dictatorship, because after the war, the dictator won, and we had a dictatorship for 40 years. So it was a time of hard work, of you could not speak, of course, because as you know, the dictator tells you what can you say and what can you cannot say. And my grandfather told me a lot of stories about that time. For instance, all the information were controlled, all of it. So they will meet together with some like-minded people in a barber shop, and they will try to get a radio that was transmitting from France
Wow.
to try to understand what was going on in the war, because all the information they had was completely censored. So they will, stay in the shop. One of them will stay in the door to see if somebody, they could not rely on was passing by, or even the police, and the others were just listening to the radio very, very quietly. Spain was not a democracy till 75. So before that, you could not talk. For instance, the women, so it was a Catholic mixed with the dictatorship. So, for instance, women could not have a bank account. They could not have a job uh, unless their husband or their father allowed that. And the bank account was always in the name of your husband or your father. They could not live alone. So we forget these kind of things really fast. And after the dictatorship, Spain boomed culturally, economically, in the exchange of ideas. There was a boom, and suddenly everything was allowed. There were a lot of cultural content. There were a lot of explosions. People start uh, doing demonstrations, for instance, that they were not allowed before, asking for improvement of their employment and so on. But unfortunately, that didn't last long. My mother, for instance, was telling me the story that um, she was a teacher, and they were on a strike because they wanted to have better options. As a teacher, they wanted to have better employment, and half the country was on a strike. So what happened was that in 81 there were an attempt to get the government again. So somebody from the military entered the parliament and tried to impose another dictatorship. That didn't succeed, but the consequence was everybody went back to work, and all these protests stopped suddenly. So it's not good to let people protest like that.
Mhm.
And after this golden age, I think that the culture and the movement in Spain slowly went down again. Even though right now, you think of Spain and you think it's a democracy, I don't think so.
So the dictatorship before was under Franco, right?
Yes, it was under
Um,
Franco.
so and then after that, Spain became a multi-party democracy.
Yes.
at least by law or in
Yeah, and
theory.
it was, quite good for some time. But right now,
Hmm.
the thing is, what defines a democracy? We need to have freedom of speech. We need to have freedom of communication. We
Hmm.
have we need to have free access to information.
Hmm.
We need to have basic liberties
So why do you say that now Spain is no longer or has gone down in terms of democracy?
because of the. I don't think you can say that that's a democracy anymore because there is no freedom of speech in Spain right now. There is a law that if the government can ban some topics, and if you speak about that, you go to jail, literally.
Wow.
So there are things you cannot mention, you cannot disagree with, or you go to jail. We have YouTubers that have been arrested and are pending an investigation because of that, because they say they didn't agree with some things, or so
Wow.
we don't have freedom of speech. Also, freedom of speech is not in the Constitution, and that's one of the wonderful things of the United States, that you have freedom of speech. So if you don't have freedom of speech, how can you have freedom of communication?
So can you give us an example of like what topics are like, taboos or forbidden in Spain?
For instance, you cannot say anything against the war in Ukraine.
Oh,
So one of YouTuber recently was arrested because he was saying some things against the war. You know,
wow.
and the point is not to be on one side or another. The point is not to be against or be pro or anything. The point is that when you don't have freedom of speech,
Hmm.
you cannot have a democracy anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And then the judicial, our systems are based in the independence of the judicial system, the
Mm-hmm.
executive branch, and the legal branch. That's not true in Spain anymore. So what's happening is that they have corrupted the judicial system. They have, so it's not like here, where you have the Supreme Court judges and they are named and that's forever. In Spain, it's not like that. The government can put them and remove them. So what's happening is that they are removing all the judges that do not agree with the current political ideas, and they are putting their judges,
Wow.
in the Supreme Court right now. So there is no independence.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, there have been a big strike
Mm-hmm.
with different judicial parts, a
Mm-hmm.
big denouncing exactly this. So the judges themselves and the attorney general and the attorneys are denouncing the lack of freedom that they have. And then, when you have laws, but then you have the judges that are going to always
Side
go
with. Mm-hmm.
in favor of the government, there is no separation.
Yeah, this sounds almost like, what we have in China is like the government controls all three branches
Yeah.
of the government or
And
one party.
exactly. So it's the same thing. So recently, the government acquired the company that is in charge of counting the votes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
again, no
So,
separation.
so what happened to you, like in Spain, that made you decide to uproot your life there and leave your culture and come to America?
People need to understand that leaving your culture, leaving your friends, leaving your family, it's a very difficult decision.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that it's not easy. It's not something that you do in a whimp
Mm-hmm.
and you just leave.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I will always miss it. I will always miss my culture. I will always miss these certain things that are, very ingrained in yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it got to a point where I could not live there. So, as I said, I have a PhD and I have three masters, but I had no job. For 2 years, I had no job.
Wow.
There is no job opportunities. The unemployment between people below 30 is more than 50%. There is no opportunities.
More than 50%
In some
unemployment.
cases, yes. And
Wow.
people just, live without a purpose, because what are you going to study if there is no job, if there is no opportunity? The employment market is very regulated, extremely regulated. So it
Okay.
makes it very difficult for everybody to get a job. So I was there without a job, and no possibility, because the problem is that your merits do not count, is who you know what counts. And then, you have all these different laws.
Mm-hmm.
Because this, in a socialist communist country, what happens is that the government is everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, including in what you eat, what you cannot eat, what you can do, and what you cannot do. So, just an example, right? I had a kind of, for the place, big, I was planting vegetables and so on. I was doing ecological agriculture. So I wanted to sell these products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went to get the certification and so on. Well, I could not ask for the certification because I had 1,000 square meters and they need 1,200 square meters, you know.
Well, why should that matter though?
Uh, and it doesn't, they don't even, check the product. Maybe, you will have to do analysis to see if that has any kind of pesticide or whatever. No. Because somebody in the government,
Uh-huh.
and that decides that it's 1,200 that day, and it's 1,200, and
Wow.
it's the minimum for everybody.
So you
There is
couldn't
no,
sell your produce. You couldn't.
I couldn't. And
Wow.
this happens to so many people, that what is going on at the end is that a lot of people work and live in the black market
Wow.
because you cannot do it.
That is amazing because a couple weeks ago we had a guest on the show from Czech Republic. That's exactly what she was saying. What happens in the 80s or 70s or 80s before communism was toppled in Czechoslovakia is that people were having to resort to black markets to trade their goods because you're not allowed to do it freely. Like that means there's no free markets anymore. That
No,
means because
no,
of the
no.
government's regulations, they're like basically strangling the free market. That makes it so hard for people that they have to go to black markets, and that is just wow. I had no idea that.
So in Spain, what people wants to do with their life is to work for the government.
Wow, really.
That's the best thing you can do, is to work for the government.
That's what happens in China. That's what parents in China tell their kids. You study hard, you go to college, you get a government job. So it's stable, it's provided, it's secure. But
Exactly.
oh wow, I had no
So
idea.
private, private ideas,
Mhm.
private. If you want to have a private company, if you want to, if you have an idea, if you want to sell it, that's just too difficult. The regulations, the money you need to have, you need to know the right people to, you know,
So it's
otherwise you
basically
will never get the permits.
wow.
So then it's just make it too difficult.
Yeah. So it's basically like nepotism. That's what actually works. That's the same as in China. Like you need the right connections. Like we call it 关系 connections. If you without the right connections, it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how competent or
It doesn't matter.
hardworking you are. Yeah, that is wow. That is horrible. So when did you come to the United States?
I came to the United States in 2021 with
Okay.
a job
Mm-hmm.
at the university,
Mm-hmm.
because the situation was just, and then after what happened in 2020, the situation in Spain was just really bad. You could not speak up. I got a job in a high school, and I was never allowed
That was in Spain or in
in
here?
Spain. I got a job before moving here. I got a job in a high school to teach, and I was never allowed in
Oh, why?
because because I have a medical condition, and I could not wear a mask. And I had a paperwork. I have the medical paperwork. I have the reasoning, that I just, officiate. and could lose consciousness. It happened to me. So, and I am not defending any kind of posture in anything, any idea. I'm not going there. It's just there are people that have issues, you know.
Mhm.
So they would not let me in. There was a law, right, in Spain, and if you had a medical condition,
Mhm.
according to the law, general law,
Mhm.
everybody had to wear a mask everywhere,
Mhm.
everywhere. But if you had a medical condition that was signed by a doctor and everything, you were exempt. You know,
Mhm.
that was the law. They didn't care about the law.
Wow.
They will not let me in. So I went to court. You know what the judge said? Yes, you're right, but we are not gonna rule in your favor.
Wow. So the judge, the court, is violating their own law.
Exactly. No problem.
Wow. Wow. I am so sorry to hear that. That is horrible.
So what are you
So,
gonna do if you know the judge will not uphold the law?
yeah, there's nowhere you can turn because they're supposed to be the defender of people's rights.
I
You had.
got exactly. I got death threats.
Oh
They
my
will
God.
prosecute me. The police will prosecute me in the street. I was walking in the street. They will come with a car harassing me 24/7 in the street
For not wearing a mask.
for not wearing. I was not protesting anything. I had a medical recognized, signed by a doctor, medical condition.
Wow. And they didn't care. They
They
say
didn't care.
they always claim that they care about the people with special conditions, they care about the weak, they care about people with health issues. But when it comes to practical like exercise of their claim, they don't, they do the opposite. They,
Because you know it's
wow.
the society says you have to do this and you cannot
That is
dissent.
that is
Even
amazing.
though your dissent is within the law, you cannot dissent.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Period.
I don't blame you for leaving because when you have no legal channel to, to defend your own rights, then what can you do other than leave? So, so when you came to America, like, did you feel things are a little better here, or?
Things are better,
Mhm.
definitely. And I came here by choice. I came here because I believe in the founding principles of this country
Mhm.
of liberty and freedom and the God given rights to look for your happiness, your freedom. You know, I believe in that. I believe that everybody needs to have the opportunity because in Spain you don't have the opportunity. You know, and this country is founded on the opportunity to develop your idea, opportunity to make your business, opportunity to speak your mind. So that's why I came here.
So, what compelled you to come and speak out on our show? What have you observed that's been happening here that concern you?
What I see, in a sense, is that they are trying to implement the same thing in this country, and this makes me very sad. Um, and the problem with socialism and communism is that you are not going to see it straight away. It's not
Mhm.
something that just arrived today and you
Mhm.
see everything. It's not doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
Uh, the socialism is very insidious, and it goes like if you were climbing a stair, you know. So you go step by step, and you give up your freedom because this happened, and you give up this other thing because well you care about the people, and at the end of the stair you realize what you have done. And I see that this country is climbing this stair. So you give up, you know, your freedom bit by bit. You get used to be told what to do,
Mhm.
and this is what we have seen. You are used now
Mhm.
to be told, and also you give up your self responsibility
Absolutely.
because it's so much easier to think that your problems are because of someone else's
Mhm.
problems than to realize that you have responsibility in them.
Mhm.
And this is happening here everywhere.
Mhm. Can you be a little more specific? Like, for example, like which part that concerns you the most?
I see a big erosion of the freedom of speech right now in this country,
Mm-hmm.
and everything starts with that. If you cannot question ideas, if there are things that you cannot say, then you are opening the door for these dictators to tell you what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And it is sad to see, for instance, that is happening at the universities a lot. Even in a research field like mine, there are the mainstream ideas, and it's very difficult to have any other idea. It's very difficult to challenge the main narrative. And astronomy doesn't really interfere with the normal um, way of living of people. It's not like medicine or any other field,
Mm-hmm.
but it still is the same thing. So in astronomy, for instance, right now we have the dark matter, dark energy, and a lot of different mainstreams, and these people are doing research on that.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot tell them, okay, what happened is if the basis is not like that. That's not allowed. You will not be published. You will not be your the peer review process will not work because they will say that's not good enough. You cannot publish this paper.
Wow. Even in such like a highly academic research fields, they don't allow challenges or
No,
questions.
no.
That is highly concerning because that's where all the questions should be asked, all the challenges should be proposed. That is
So I,
wow.
I, I have experienced this firsthand because I did my PhD on a topic that was not mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
that was challenging the mainstream. And we had, at the beginning, we had a lot of issues to get our papers published. They didn't want to publish them.
Uh-huh.
I had the experience of going to conferences, to present the work, and they will tell me things like, "We have been doing this like this for 40 years, so
So that's the
what?"
way to do things, and you're not allowed to challenge it.
Exactly.
Wow.
I mean, and then we are not doing science anymore.
What do you mean by that?
When you cannot challenge an idea,
Right. Mm-hmm.
when you cannot say, "What about this?"
Mm-hmm.
Uh, maybe we have to think this in another different way, or maybe this is not working.
Mm-hmm.
We are not doing science anymore. We are just publishing one paper after the other, saying exactly the same without anything new.
Wow.
And that, from my point of view, is not science.
You're right. Yeah, science evolves. Without evolution, there is no science because science requires constant development, constant new discoveries of theories and of facts. Where you are working in the university, they don't do that anymore, and if you challenge them, they refuse to publish your paper. And
Exactly.
wow,
Because the
that's
peer review is who are the peer review?
yeah. So
The peer
that's
review are your colleagues. And if they don't agree with your idea, it doesn't matter if it's good.
wow.
If it challenges, the thing is, academia has become money making process.
Right.
So you need to get a grant, and you need to get to a tenure, and you need to get to a professorship, and all these steps, are not based on the quality of your science. They
Mm-hmm.
are based on the quantity.
Mm-hmm.
So you publish a lot of papers. They don't have to be breakthrough at
Mm-hmm.
all,
Mm-hmm.
because the quantity is what matters. You write grants saying exactly the buzzwords that they want,
Mm-hmm.
because whatever is fashionable in that time. For instance, right now in astronomy, the fashionable is finding planets, finding other planets and finding, trying to find life in another places. If you question that, if you question them or say, well, I am finding some problems with your method, you are out because, all the grants are there. And then all
Wow.
this money that has been invested, if they prove that all the things were wrong, all this money was for nothing.
Wow. But
So,
that's how science is supposed to be. You prove, and you disprove at the same time. You disprove as much as you prove. That's how science has always been
no,
done. That's how science evolves.
not
Wow.
anymore. No.
So they're actually acting like government. So they're not acting like scientists. They're acting like authorities.
And then
Wow.
you find this, the something that was very strange for me,
Hmm.
coming from Spain, which we have a monarchy, and I did my PhD in Sweden. There is a monarchy too. The
Hmm.
fact that there is a monarchy there, in a sense, make people very aware of the status, and have found in the society to be more egalitarian when there is a monarchy. Strangely
Interesting.
enough,
Yeah, that is so interesting.
here in the
Mhm.
United States, there is no monarchy, but then these people believes that they are monarchy.
I have observed something to that effect. People think so highly of themselves, they believe themselves to be the absolute authority in their field. Or I mean, we saw this during COVID. Like the you can't, yeah, like COVID just brought out that side of things like so
So,
clearly.
for instance, in Europe, in science, in all the
Hmm.
places I have been,
Hmm.
uh, you can talk with the top professor and question him, like, I don't understand this, or why you don't do this like this, and they will have a conversation with you as an
Hmm.
equal, even though you may be an undergrad, or they will treat you as an equal. And something that was very strange for me here is that that's not true.
Universities in higher education, that is very concerning because these institutions are the ones that are supposed to bring out the talents of the country, the best, most brilliant brains.
You cannot question some people because of the position they have.
Right.
Because if they say something, that's
Mhm.
what's happening.
Yeah, it
And
is.
again, that's not science.
Yeah. That reminds me of, when I was back in university in China, in the first year, that was the first year when the Chinese government decided to reform the universities because in the previous years, it was all government funded. The entire university system was government funded. So you pass the college entrance exam and you became a student and everything is provided for you, like you don't pay a tuition fee and you don't pay for accommodation or anything, lodging. But that just created massive problems with the quality of the education because the professors, they didn't care, they were paid either way, they don't get paid more if the students didn't learn anything. So for decades, well, for at least a decade, a little bit more after the Cultural Revolution, after universities were reopened under Deng Xiaoping, college students basically spend most of their time going to dance parties, just having fun and not learning anything. I remember in my first year, I remember like a senior student in the Arabic department. He was like he did not learn anything in the 4 years. For his graduation dissertation, he literally took a book from the library, photocopied 60 pages, and handed it in, put his own name on it, handed it in as his dissertation, and he passed. He passed as a graduate because the professors would be like, if the student doesn't pass and doesn't graduate, that makes us look bad. So it all became a show. Nothing is real. No science was being done. No research was being done. No knowledge was being passed on. It was all for show. And that's like what you just described in the university, in your experience in the university here, like just reminds me of that. And that's a very dangerous trend.
So I must say that there are wonderful people in the university that really cares. Here I
Mm-hmm.
have found wonderful professors,
Mm-hmm.
that really care and really do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
But you have this other trend of people that do not care and that they uh, are not accountable, because the other thing is that the people at the universities are not accountable, really. So I
That's
have
true.
seen the two sides.
Mhm.
And I have seen the professor, well, that wants to just get the tenure. So you need to have X papers and you need to have this amount of students. But it doesn't mean that you have good papers and that you care about the students. So, for instance, I have the experience of talking with a PhD student that was with one of these professors. And basically, the professor treat you as an slave. You have to do X, Y, and Z, and you cannot question. You cannot get out of there. You cannot do something else. You cannot have your own ideas because the professor has a grant for X, Y, Z. Period. So then, how are you teaching research? This person is not learning how to do research. This
Mm-hmm.
person is learning how to obey orders.
So it's the system that is like protecting these professors who are not actually doing their job, but their job is secure because of the system that's being implemented in the universities.
And if you are a student, you have zero chance of being able to do anything about it.
Wow.
There is not really a way to protest because also most of the students don't know anything else. They
Right.
don't know an alternative. They don't know that, I was very lucky when I did my PhD. I had a wonderful supervisor that allowed me to question everything, that allowed me to do my own thing. He was wonderful. So I had the other experience. But here in this country, I have seen both. I have seen extremely good professors that really care and really good at job, and I have seen the other thing. And the problem is that the quality does not matter. What matters at the end is how many papers and how many students.
Mm-hmm.
There is no alter, investigation of how are they doing this.
It's all
No,
about getting the funds and getting the
exactly.
grants. Yeah.
And then the other thing is that we are seeing right now is that what your political views, which should not matter in research, especially in a research like astronomy, are extremely important. So you are going to get more funds, you're going to get more grants, you're going to go farther if you have the right political views. And
Wow.
if you don't, you're going to be shamed on social media. Even, and we have seen examples of this, you're going to be kicked out
Wow. So
of
when
the
you
university.
say the correct political views, like which are they? What are they? Like what kind of views would be considered correct politically?
You need to be now left wing. You need to be, a trans activist. You need to be uh, in favor of eliminating the freedom of speech. You know, you have to be in favor of people cannot say some things. Um, you
Wow.
have to be activist. You have to be Black Lives Matter. And I am not saying my personal view of any of this. It does not matter. The point is that if you're a researcher in a very academical field like astronomy, that
Mm-hmm.
should not matter in your career
Mm-hmm.
because that's your personal life. But that's not true anymore.
That is
So
scary.
people have been kicked out of the university because they invited somebody to speak about a different point of view, because they had a different point of view, because they made a mistake maybe in the classroom and say something that was not okay. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have this mob that completely destroys your career.
That is so scary because, like you said, in an area in a field that's highly academic, like astronomy, you need to basically, stay in the line politically. Otherwise, you will be shunned, you'll be excluded or marginalized. That is not American university that I imagined it to be.
Or for instance, right now, if you say you are a Christian, you're gonna be shown. Your
Even that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your point of view is gonna be less taken into account.
wow.
Because you are the weird Christian.
Where is the freedom of religion? That's First Amendment right. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe this. Wow. Thank you for this information. That is astonishing.
Again, I don't position myself because
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I like to hear to all point of views,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that I think is what enriches my mind. Obviously, I have a point of view,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm really looking forward to listen to the other side because
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna learn something from it,
Mm-hmm.
But right now, people create this bubble with people that only think the same way. We are being more and more radicalized on anybody that thinks differently. They are bad people or they are a bad person. That's not who we are. I think as human beings.
Yeah, that is terrifying because especially in the academic field, that is where the brains should work. That's where diversity of mind is more important anywhere else. It's like it's everyone should have their own perspective, their own ideas. Where the new That's how science developed. In the last several hundred years, people came up with new ideas and theories and had those ideas and theories tested and proven or disproven, by experience or experiments. This is what you have just told me is just really astonishing and is extremely concerning because when the top institutions of this country are not educating people, are not really passing on knowledge, and not really cultivating curiosity and diversity of mind, then it's really just indoctrination camp in some ways.
For me, I will always be grateful to my supervisor because he fostered questioning. I had the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of people. He fostered all of that. But right now, if you have a grant and the grant is to achieve this real result, you cannot afford that your student question anything. You need your
Wow.
student to do that and only that, and you just eliminate any possibility of going in another direction. Because it will take more time. You will not have as many papers or as many results if you start questioning things.
It's all about getting money from the government, getting money from the taxpayers, and getting the funds and grants. So what do you think we should do? What like to counter all of this? I know, like it feels like all the efforts are kind of futile when the bigger environment is so powerful. All these institutions have become so powerful. Like, what do you think we should do in the face of all of these?
I think we should start by not falling for this division that they are creating,
Mm-hmm.
and we should start listening to each other. Foster freedom of speech, even though what the other person is saying, maybe you will be completely disagree. You need to foster freedom of speech,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that it's time to start questioning the institutions and what they are doing and what we are achieving. What are the results of this? I ask these people this question: do you know any scientific result from STEAM areas recently? Do
Mm-hmm.
we have any big discovery recently? Not really. Because if you are not allowed to do free research, you will not have new discoveries.
Yeah. Do you think that's like effective from your experience? Like when you talk to people and ask questions, are they responsive or
No, in general, they
no?
are responsive in a bad way.
Oh, I do feel like the culture of this questioning and honest communication and direct interaction, and it is kind of slipping away. Like, yeah, like you said, they might respond in a negative way, and which is very frustrating for me. Like, I try to ask questions and ask people to just ask questions, like see things from a different perspective. But I do feel many times there is like a push, they immediately shut down or just push back, or they have ready-made answers that were fed to them by the professors or by the media or by the teachers, and it makes it very difficult.
So that the thing is, this system protects itself because if you have been through all the years of education, you are in a graduate program, for instance, and you always have been told what to think,
Mhm.
but you have never been told to think.
Right.
You really, it creates an insecurity
Hmm.
because somebody told me I have to have this conclusion,
Right.
but I have not reached this conclusion myself.
Hmm.
So if somebody, and I identify myself with this conclusion. So if somebody asks me something, it's very damaging for the person because you really don't know how to defend it
Right.
because you have never really thought about it.
Hmm. So I remember you mentioning, like, when you were, before this unpleasant experience you had in Spain during COVID, and you were basically kind of buying into the same narrative as, like, socialism is good, and it's just like what we were, like, we all grew up, like you just said, being told what to think instead of how to think, or yeah, we were all basically brainwashed that way. So tell us a little bit about that, like when you were in Spain, like, how
Yeah.
how that was.
So the thing is that socialism is very alluring
Right.
because I really think that most of the people are good people, and we will love to help others, and we will love that poverty ends, and we will love to have a good environment, and we will love to not have sickness.
Hmm.
So they prey on the goodness of people.
Hmm.
They prey on that. They say, if you think this and if you do that, everybody's going to be okay and everything is going to be so great. You have to think, you have to stop and think what that does mean. In a sense, socialist is full of elaborated, sweet sounding words that are saturated of fallacies. And the end result is that you give up yourself because you need to follow the government and what the government says. So for me, I started realizing that it was not so good when I saw that the merit is not important. When you work hard, for me, it was very hard to go to university. My family didn't have any money. My grandfather grew up in an orphanage. My grandmother had to stop studying when she was 9. And for my grandfather, education was the most important thing in the world. He had the idea that education would set you free. That if you have knowledge, you can decide for yourself. So it was hard. It was hard to get to university. It was hard. Uh, and when you work hard and you get results and you see that it doesn't matter, that's not important, then you start questioning things.
Hmm.
Then you start questioning the whole narrative. And you realize that the reality is that you become a replaceable number in the factory of the state. And how good you are doesn't matter. For instance, in Spain, what happens is that, as I said, people want to work for the government. Once they get the job, they cannot be fired. So it doesn't matter how they do the job.
So if you get a job in the government, you can never be fired.
No. Well, there are exceptions, of course,
Hmm.
but it's very difficult.
Oh.
So then, there are people that take it seriously and do an awesome job.
Hmm.
But then there are people that, why would I work?
Hmm.
Why would I do a good job? And that creates a social structure where if somebody does a good job, it's harassed because of it. Because then you are showing that the others are not. So
Right.
it's very typical that you go to a social administration, for instance, and there is one person that knows how to do stuff, and the others are just asking him questions or her all the time because they have never learned or they don't really know. So when you eliminate meritocracy from the system, and it's just how are you going to get a good society? If you don't have the right people for the right job, what do you expect?
Yeah, that's kind of like what happened to me back in China. Yeah, it's, equity. It's like I was getting too good, so my pay needed to be cut down to be the same as everybody else, so I could take it down a notch and not be so good and not excel, basically. That is horrible. I mean, it's like that does not allow personal development or personal growth. Basically, you're not allowed to be treated as a person. You're just one of the masses,
Yeah.
and so it's really that bad. And
Yeah, I mean,
in Spain, I can't believe it.
for
It's
me, socialism is the death of the soul. Every one of us, everybody is good at something.
yeah.
If you are lucky enough to find what you're good at,
Hmm.
and you are lucky enough to be able to do that for a living, you will
Hmm.
be a happy person, right? Your self-worth and your happiness will be high. But
Hmm.
if you are not, because
Hmm.
everybody has to do the same,
Hmm.
because that's not what the party allows,
Hmm.
then you're going to be miserable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on top of that, you are told
Hmm.
that the guilty party is not the party, but this other person. You are misplacing the reason where you are unhappy. And
Yeah.
then you create victimism. I don't know anybody that has reached higher goals that have spent a life on the victimism.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And then we see that happening here a lot, especially the young people. They play the victim and they cultivate this victimhood in certain groups of people. And that is very concerning. And I also want to ask one more question. So young people here often like they admire the free healthcare system in Europe. Like, so tell us a little bit about that in Spain.
First of all, there is nothing free. There is nothing free because if you have something free, somebody is working for free.
Mhm.
So that means you have slaves. So there is nothing free.
Mhm.
Somebody is paying for that. So you need to understand who is paying for that.
Mhm.
The healthcare is more expensive than here.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because it's paid by your taxes, and your taxes
Right.
for the health care are much higher than anything that you can hire here as a
Wow.
private company. And you cannot opt out. You can decide, you can decide, I don't want a healthcare provider. There you cannot. It's subtracted from your taxes. So if you are working and paying taxes, you're paying way more, I know by myself, than you're paying here. But then, okay, you have the healthcare. What does that mean? It means that the government are going to regulate the kind of care you can have. It's
Yeah.
not going to be their decision. It's not going to even be the doctor's decision because it's regulated by the government. And it also means that the quality may be very good, may be very bad, but you cannot do anything about it. You cannot choose to change the doctor, for instance, because it's what is assigned to you. And it also means that for everything, you have a long queue. For instance, you need to get an operation, right? And it's very urgent. Well, they put you in a queue, and maybe you get the operation in 3 years.
Okay.
But that time is completely useless.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, what happens is that you barely have any healthcare. That is completely regulated by the government. The government decides what kind of care can you have and what kind you cannot access, period.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, I can give you two examples of this.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother fell a long time ago and broke her arm.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was free of the casket, she needed to do rehab to be able to move the arm again. Okay, they scheduled her and she was scheduled to get rehab in 1 year and a half.
Wow.
If you wait 1 year and a half, you have lost completely the mobility of this arm.
Wow. I'm speechless. A year and a half.
A year and a half.
And then what happened?
That you have to pay privately.
Uh,
So what's happening is in Spain that you see the doctor on the clinic,
mm-hmm.
on the public thing, and they schedule a test or whatever, but they also have a private practice. So they send you to the private practice to get these whatever test you need in a timely manner. So you end up paying twice. And I'm going to give you another example
Mm-hmm.
that, especially for women. So I wanted to do a check with an OB-GYN, gynecologist. I wanted to do a check in Sweden, which is another socialist country, because I had some concerns. So I called to get a test, and they asked me, "Are you pregnant?" No. So you can only see a gynecologist there if you're going to get an abortion.
Abortion?
Yes. You cannot just go and see a gynecologist because you have some concerns and you want to check some things. That's not, because the government decides that's not the treatment you need.
Oh my goodness. What if women have can have so many healthy issues at a certain age, fibroids, polyps,
No.
Oh my goodness, they would not let you even just to have a checkup for
No.
your concerns.
No.
Wow, that's some freak healthcare. Thank you very much. That's not for me.
So they
Wow.
decide, and that means they decide on everything. So the political, wherever that you have in that moment, will decide what you can get and when you cannot get.
Wow. I hope the young people are listening to this. When you're young and strong, you're not so concerned about your own health, but everybody ages, everybody gets sick, everybody will need some good quality medical provider help. If I hope people are paying attention to this. I'm so glad you came on our show today to talk about this. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap up?
I understand that it's very alluring, the socialism and what they are saying, but people are not thinking what it really means. that you are paying, the people that are working are paying for everything else, that the taxes are enormous, that you cannot opt out, that you are on the government that decides everything you can do and you cannot do, and that it doesn't come immediately, it comes step by step. And if you don't understand and start to realize what's going on, if you give up your freedom of speech, if you give up your freedoms, then you're going to have to comply with everything, and it's always going to get to something that you don't agree with. And for me, I just the last line, I think that one of the difference between freedom society, free society, and socialist communist society is that free society, they believe in people and mistrust the government, but socialist society believes in the government and mistrusts the people.
Well said. Well said. That pretty much sums it up perfectly. Well, thank you so much, Iya. I'm so glad you came to our
Thank
show.
you.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad you told your story. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep talking. Keep telling the people the true stories of our lives, not the fantasy land that the media creates for the news consumers. Thank you so much. I'm really glad
Thank
to
you.
have talked to you today.
Thank you for having me.
And our audience, if you like our show, please like and share. And if you are an immigrant, or if you have lived overseas for a long time, you don't have to be an actual immigrant and have observed a lot of similarities, or you have concerns about where our country is headed. You would like to be on our show, just leave us a line or a comment underneath this video and contact Lily on her social media platforms. We'll be happy to listen to anyone who has a will to share their stories and share their perspectives. Thank you so much. I'm glad we had this discussion, and hopefully maybe in the future we'll be talking again. Thank you so much, Iya.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.